Welcome to Blender VT, and this is a Blender video tutorial for the 3D Viewport in Blender version 2.34. Now we are going to learn about how to navigate in 3D space using the 3D Viewport, that big box right there. If you've never used a 3D program before, you'll need to get used to the idea that even though the screen is two-dimensional, it is very easy for you to place an object in 3D space. All you have to do is just look at that object in different angles and move it. Okay, now Blender uses three basic viewing directions, and you won't be able to see that because we have a perfect cube, so I'm just going to edit that and then add the monkey. Okay, so just ignore what I just did. We'll talk about that in the next chapter. Okay, so now we have an object that we can actually look at different angles. Okay, so we have three basic viewing directions. These are side, front, and top. These can be accessed through the View menu, or you could just be like everyone else and use the keyboard shortcuts. Alright, so the keyboard shortcuts are 3, 1, and 7 on the numeric keypad on your keyboard. So take a look at those. You'll notice that 3, 1, and 7 are on the corners of the keypad. So if you press 3, that will give you a side view. If you press 1, you're looking at the front. And if you press 7, now you're looking at the top. One thing you'll notice is when you do that, that little icon right there will change. So take a look at that as I change it. Now you can see that it updates and lets you know what axis you're looking down because that's the one that isn't appearing. So let's say we have our side view, and now we're looking at the left side. Let's say we want to look at the right side. So we want to look down the same axis, but looking at it at a different direction. Hold down Control and then press 3. So now all we're doing is we're just looking down the axis in a different direction. Holding down Control to 1 also does the same thing. 7 does the same thing. So that's a useful feature. Alright, so aside from those, you can also rotate, zoom, and translate the view any way you like. So let's start by doing that. Click and drag with the middle mouse button on the viewport area. Okay, remember that middle mouse button. Remember how I talked about how the interface uses the middle mouse button a lot? Well, this is when you start to realize this. Okay, so hold down the middle mouse button, and let's say we start at the center, then click and drag, and you can see that it rotates the view from the center. Now let's say I click and drag at the outside, and then move around the center. So now you can see, instead of rotating the object, I'm actually rolling. Well, it's still rotating, but it's more of a roll. So that will take you a little bit of getting used to, realizing that depending on where you click on, where you start to middle mouse and drag on the 3D viewport, will change how it's going to drag the view. So you'll just have to play with that a little bit and get used to it. Okay. So, and also you can also rotate the view by using what I like to call the directionals on the numeric keypad. If you have a keyboard that has arrows drawn on it, that will help. So if you use the 4, 8, 6, and 2 buttons on the keypad, you'll notice that you can now rotate the view with discrete increments. Okay. Now, to translate the view, hold down Shift and then use the middle mouse button to drag. Now you can see we're just moving the view like a flat screen with a hand tool in, say, Photoshop or Illustrator. Okay, so you can also translate the view by holding down Control and then using the 4, 8, 6, and 2 buttons on the numeric keypad, and that will also translate the view in discrete increments. Alright, now you can also zoom in and zoom out by holding down Control and then holding the middle mouse button and then dragging. Okay, you can also use the mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out, and you can even use the plus and minus keys on the numeric keypad to zoom in and zoom out. Now one thing you'll notice, it'll take you a while to get used to the whole holding down Control and the middle mouse button and then drag, because it's really easy and really quick to get lost in a scene. Like right now, I can't see the scene at all because it's zoomed out so much and so quickly. Well, if you press the Home button on the keyboard, it will take your current angle of view and then it will zoom in just enough so that all of the objects are conveniently and comfortably located in front of you in the scene. So that's a good way to help you from getting lost. Now we can also switch perspective in the 3D viewport. To switch between perspective and orthographic projection, press the 5 key on the numeric keypad. Okay, there, if you do not know the difference, you should be able to see it immediately. Since our eye is used to seeing objects that are farther away appear to be smaller, orthographic view might appear strange at first, which is what this is. And that is because objects that are further away are exactly the same size as objects that are close to you. This view is very helpful for modeling and also accurately placing objects in a 3D scene. And that's just because this gives you a more technical insight of the scene. Alright, now let's press 0 on the numeric keypad. That brings you to camera mode, which essentially what you're seeing right here is the viewpoint of the camera. Alright, so, and this is the rendered image will contain everything within this outer dotted line. That inner dotted line that you see right here, that is as some of you may recognize as the TV safe margin or line, and that lets you know that anything that is within this border right here is not guaranteed to be viewable on a TV set. And that's just because of how TVs are designed, that it will crop off some of the image. Alright, so now zooming in and zooming out is also possible in this view, but if you want to change the viewpoint of the camera view, you have to actually move the camera. And we'll talk about that in the object mode section. Now, depending on the speed of your computer, the complexity of your scene, and the type of work you are currently doing, you can switch between several different drawing modes. The drawing mode can be selected with the appropriate menu button on the header. Okay, textured. Textured, this attempts to draw everything as completely as possible, though it is still no alternative to rendering. And note that if you do not have lighting in your scene, everything will appear black. Okay, then you have shaded. This is similar. This draws solid surfaces, including the lighting calculation. As with texture drawing, you won't see anything without lights. This can also create significant slowdown on your computer because it does the lighting calculations whenever you move or rotate an object or the camera. Okay, then you have solid. Surfaces are drawn as solids, but the display also works without lights. And also one thing you'll notice with... Alright, changing view modes. Okay, like one thing you'll notice with shaded is that the object is illuminated the way it would be from the camera. So here you have the light source, and there you have the object. Now if I switch back to shaded view or solid view, now it's going to be illuminated no matter what because the light source is essentially just a little bit offset from my current viewpoint. So you can see all the objects whenever you need to, without lights or not. Okay, and then you have wireframe. That objects only consist of lines that make their shapes recognizable, and this is the default drawing mode. And then you have bounding box. Objects are not drawn at all in bounding box mode. Instead, the mode shows only the rectangular boxes that correspond to each object's size and shape. Now you can use the Z key to toggle between wireframe and solid display, and you can use Shift Z to toggle between wireframe and shaded display. Okay, now you also have something called the local view. When in local view, the selected objects are displayed, and that's it. And that can make editing easier in complex scenes. So to enter local view, first select the object, which is this current object right here. You can tell that an object is selected if you're in wireframe mode because it's purple, or if you're in solid view because it has a purple outline. So go to view, and then here you have these options, local view, or if you press the divide key on the numpad, that works as well. So now that you can see that everything's gone from the scene, no lights, no camera, no nothing, just the monkey, because that's what we had selected. And then you can go back to global view by selecting that. So that's a good way to simplify the scene when you start modeling or doing other tasks. Okay, so now as far as the things I've been talking about, I've only been telling you the hotkeys. Just remember that everything can be accessed through here, even zooming in if you wanted to. Of course, this is a terribly slow way to do zooming, so I would never use it. Just use the shortcuts, it makes things easier. But if anything else, you can use this as a reference because all the shortcuts are listed. So it's a good way to remember things. Alright, now 3D scenes often become exponentially more confusing with growing complexity. Now to get this under control, objects can be grouped into layers so that only the layers you select are displayed at any one time. 3D layers differ from layers you may know from 2D applications. They have no influence on the drawing order, and they are, except for some special functions, solely to provide the modeler with a better overview. Okay, Blender provides 20 layers. You can choose which are to be displayed with the small unlabeled buttons in the header right here. To select only one layer, click the appropriate button with the left mouse button, and you can see that only that one layer and that one layer only. Now if you want to select more than one, hold down Shift while clicking. So there we go. So to select layers via the keyboard, press the 1 through 0 keys on the main area of the keyboard for layers 1 through 10, as you can see I'm doing right now. And if you want to select layers 11 through 20, hold down Alt and then 1, 2, 3, and so on. So you can select those layers as well. And the holding down Shift does the same thing. You can select more than one layer or turn off more than one layers. And if you hold down Shift and Alt at the same time, now you can do the same thing with the bottom row as well. Okay, now by default, this lock button right here, directly to the right of the layer buttons, is pressed. So this means that changes to the viewed layers affect all 3D viewports. To select only certain layers in one window, you deselect locking first. So let's illustrate that. I'm going to split this area so I can have 2 3D viewports. Okay, and then you can see that as I select different layers, it affects all of the 3D viewports that also have locking on as well. So as soon as I make one of those independent by turning locking off, and now as I change, you can see that the layer selection is independent. So there's another nice feature. Okay, now to move selected objects into a different layer, you can do that by pressing the M key. So I have this monkey selected already. I press the M key, and now it's going to ask me, okay, what layer do you want this monkey to be in? And I'm going to say, oh, I want him in layer 2. So I click OK, and now you can see that in my scene, after I join that, okay, there we go. You can see that in my scene I have the camera, and I have the light source somewhere. Oh, there's light source. Okay, so I just have the camera and the light source, and then when I click on layer 2, now I have the monkey. So I can select both of those, so now you can see it. One thing to realize, though, is not only is the objects I have in the current layer visible in the 3D view, also they are the only ones that are going to be rendered when you actually render the scene. So when I go into shaded view, you can see that the object is now completely black because there is no light source. And then when I actually render the scene, you can see that it is not illuminated because there is, again, no light source. And this brings up an interesting concept. If you press M and then Shift left click, you can say, okay, I want this object to be on more than one layer. So I click OK. Then you can see as I click on these other layers, the monkey is still there until I reach the layers that he isn't in. This is especially helpful when I do lighting. So let's say I have a bunch of complex objects and I just have the monkey, but I also want to have the same lighting conditions. So I say, okay, well, I select the light source, and I press M, and I say I want this light source to appear on these first 5 layers. So you can see the light source appears on all of those. So now I can render that scene with the light source. So another neat little function. So that about wraps it up for the 3D viewport. And next we're going to start talking about the vital functions in Blender, how you actually save, load, some basic rendering, and changing your user preferences and themes.